Hello and welcome to the daily chapter reading of How to Know God. Mystery of Mysteries. This is the work of the soul that most pleases God. The cloud of unknowing. The mystery of God wouldn't exist if the world wasn't also a mystery. Some scientists believe we are closer than ever to a theory of everything, or TOE, as the physicians dub it. TOE will explain the beginning of the universe and the end of time, the first and last breaths of cosmic existence. From quarks to quasars, all will be revealed as the old melodramas used to promise. Is there a place for God in this everything? Or does the Creator get booted out of his own creation? His fate may be important, but when it is wrapped up with ours, it becomes all important. Consider again the reality sandwich that has served as our model. As we saw before, it comes in 3 layers: material reality, quantum domain, virtual domain. Anyone could be forgiven for thinking that God is nowhere to be found here. In fact, that all the wonders of the sacred world will become mundane on the day that the TOE explains it all away. For centuries, humans looked in the mirror of nature and saw heroes, wizards, dragons, and holy grails reflected back. The sacred was real, a source of supreme power, and nothing could exist, from a river to a thunderclap, without a god to cause it. Today the mirror has cloud. We have outgrown the need for a thunder god or a hero born on Olympus. What do we see instead? A society that strip mines old myths to build a city like Las Vegas. If you want to meet myth here, you check into a hotel casino called Excalibur. The only god is fortune, the only dragons to conquer are the slot machines, and most of the time they win. It is true, as the poetic sentiment goes, that one touch of nature makes the whole world kin. Then one touch of myth makes the whole world sacred. In a mythless world, something is missing, but do we know what it is? There are many clues to that answer, scattered around in the sacred sites of the world. No one can stand before the great pyramid of Chops, or Khufu to give him his proper Egyptian name, without feeling the presence of a power that is absent even in the hugest skyscraper. The pharaoh once entombed in the depths of this massive structure was immortal, but he aspired to be immortal, and he fed that aspiration by erecting the largest single mass of stone ever piled in one place, even to this day. He also backed up his ambition with God. Khufu was venerated as a descendant of the gods and was therefore a god-man himself. Is this a demonstration that the ego of a king knows no bounds? Certainly, but there's more here. Khufu's link to the gods linked his people at the same time. From time immemorial, humans have worried over the same question. Do I have a soul? What happens after I die? Is there an afterlife, and will I meet God when I get there? The Great Pyramid was an answer erected in stone. You can almost hear the stones crying out, "Now tell me I'm not immortal." From a harsh contrast, go back to Las Vegas. What do we see there? Wealth, ambition to rival the pharaohs, but are the people who cram into these pleasure domes any more secure about the great questions? Or does a world without spiritual power force us to seek distraction because underneath we do not know the answers at all? The family of man is bound up in the sacred. We cannot allow it to die without strangling our blood ties to a deeper reality, that we all come from one place, that we are on a journey toward a greater good, that our every act is being weighed from a cosmic perspective. Ordinary reality is trivial compared to this heritage. The theory of everything will be useless, if not destructive, unless we can use it to keep the sacred alive. Fortunately, the most solid, reliable things in existence, a seashell, a tree branch, a pothole in the middle of the road, partake of God's mystery. If you believe in a rock, you are automatically believing in God. Let me explain. Ordinary reality is only the top layer of our sandwich. The material world is full of familiar objects that we can see, feel, touch, taste, and smell. As big objects become very small, shrinking to the size of atoms, our senses fail us. Theoretically, the shrinkage has to stop somewhere, because no atom is smaller than hydrogen, the first material particle to be born out of the Big Bang. in fact, an amazing transformation happens beyond the atom. Everything solid disappears. Atoms are composed of vibrating energy packets that have no solidity at all, no mass, no size, nothing but the senses to see or touch. The Latin word for a packet or package is quantum, the word chosen to describe one unit of energy inside the atom and, as it turned out, a new level of reality. At the quantum level, nothing of the material world is left intact. It is strange enough to hold up your hand and realize that it is actually, at a deeper level, invisible vibrations taking place in a void. Even at the atomic level, all objects are revealed as 99.9999% empty space. On its own scale, the distance between a whirling electron and the nucleus it revolves around is wider than the distance between the Earth and the Sun. But you can never capture that electron anyway, since it too breaks down into energy vibrations that wink in and out of existence millions of times per second. Therefore, the whole universe is a quantum mirage, winking in and out of existence millions of times per second. At the quantum level, the whole cosmos is like blinking light. There are no stars or galaxies, only vibrating energy fields that our senses are too dull and slow to pick up, given the incredible speed at which light and electricity move. In the animal kingdom, some nervous systems are much faster than ours and others much slower. A snail's neurons pick up signals from the outside world so slowly, for example, that events any faster than 3 seconds would not be perceived. In other words, if a snail was looking at an apple, and I quickly reached in and snatched it away, the snail would not be able to detect my hand. It would see the apple disappear before its very eyes. In the same way, quantum flashes are millions of times too rapid for us to register, so our brains play a trick on us by seeing solid objects that are continuous in time and space, the same way that a movie seems continuous. A movie consists of 24 still pictures flashing by per second, with 24 gaps of blackness as each frame is taken away and a new one put in its place. But since our brains cannot perceive 48 stop-motion events in 1 second, the illusion of the movie is created. Now speed this up by many powers of 10, and you get the trick of the movie we call real life. You and I exist as flashing photons with a black void in between each flash. The quantum light show comprises our whole body, our every thought and wish, and every event we take part in. In other words, we are being created over and over again all the time. Genesis is now and always has been. Who is behind this never-ending creation? Whose power of mind or vision is capable of taking the universe away and putting it back again in a fraction of a second? The power of creation, whatever it turns out to be, lays even beyond energy, a force with the ability to turn gaseous clouds of dust into stars and eventually into DNA. In the terminology of physics, we refer to this pre-quantum level as virtual. When you go beyond all energy, there is nothing, a void. Visible light becomes virtual light, real space becomes virtual space, real time becomes virtual time. In the process, all properties vanish. Light no longer shines, space covers no distance, time is eternal. This is the womb of creation, infinitely dynamic and alive. Words like empty, dark, and cold do not apply to it. The virtual domain is so inconceivable that only religious language seems to touch it at all. Today in India, a devout believer may greet the dawn with an ancient Vedic hymn. In the beginning, there was neither existence nor non-existence. All this world was unmanifest energy. The one breathed without breath by its own power. Nothing else was there. In modern terms, this verse tells us that God can only be found in a virtual state, where all energy is stored before creation. Physics has struggled hard with this state that comes before time and space, and so has popular imagination. It may surprise many to learn that the familiar image of God as a patriarch in a white robe seated on his throne has little authority, even in Judaic scripture. The image appears only once in the book of Daniel, whereas we are told many times in the book of Moses that God is without human form. The best working theory about creation reads as follows. Before the Big Bang, space was unbound, expand like an accordion into infinite pleats or dimensions, while time existed in seed form, an eternal presence without events, and therefore needing no past, present, or future. This state was utterly void in one sense and utterly full in another. It contained nothing we could possibly perceive, yet the potential for everything resided here. As the Vedic seers declared, neither existence nor non-existence could be found, since those terms apply only to things that have a beginning, middle, and end. Physicists often refer to this state as a singularity. Space, time, and the entire material universe were once contained in a point. A singularity is conceived as the smallest dot you can imagine, and therefore not a dot at all. Now, if you can imagine that the cosmos exploded into being in a dazzling flash of light from this one point, you must then go a step further. Because the pre-creation state has no time, it is still here. The Big Bang has never happened in the virtual domain, and yet paradoxically, all Big Bangs have happened, no matter how many times the universe expands across billions of light years, only to collapse back onto itself and withdraw back into the void. Nothing will change at the virtual level. This is as close as physics has come to the religious notion of a God who is omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent. Omni means all, and the virtual state, since it has no boundaries of any kind, is properly called the All. It isn't surprising that we find it so difficult to speak about the All. In India, seers often refer to it simply as that, or tat in Sanskrit. At the moment of enlightenment, a person is able to go past the five senses to perceive the only truth that can be uttered. I am that, you are that, and all is that. The meaning isn't a riddle. It simply states that behind the veil of creation, the pre-creation state still exists, enclosing everything. A physicist friend once stated the same word in newer words. You must realize, Deepak, that time is just a cosmic convenience that keeps everything from happening all at once. This convenience is needed at the material level, but not at deeper levels. Therefore, if you could see yourself in your virtual state, all the chaos and swirling galaxies would make perfect sense. They form one pattern unfolding in perfect symmetry. Viewed from this perspective, the end point of all creation is now. The whole cosmos has conspired to create you and me sitting here this very second. Nothing is more fascinating than to watch science blurring its edges into spirit. There are no easier words for the transition zone than quantum, and no easier words for God than virtual. To track down a miracle, one must go into these domains. Miracles indicate that reality doesn't begin and end at the material level. How do I find God? A young disciple once asked a famous guru in India. I can't see any evidence that he is anywhere around us, and millions of people live very well without him. Everything without God happens in space and time. This is the world you are used to, his guru replied. Space and time are like a net that has trapped you, but nets always have holes. Find such a hole and jump through it. Then God will be obvious. Every religious tradition contains such loopholes, escape routes into a world beyond ours. In the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus says that his role in life is to point the disciples away from the rule of the five senses, which are totally confined to space-time. I shall give you what no eye has seen, and what no ear has heard, and what no hand has touched, and what has never occurred to the human mind. This process was certainly carried out whenever Jesus performed any one of his 30 or so miracles, but it is fascinating to observe that often they were performed with considerable reluctance, as if they were somewhere beside the point. The real point was to see that our senses aren't trustworthy at all. The incurable level only appears that way. The few loaves and fishes are only an illusion. The storm in the Sea of Galilee can be calmed by a mere act of will. After healing the leper with his touch, Jesus sounds particularly impatient of anyone overawed by what he has done. Then Jesus dismissed him with this stern warning. Be sure you say nothing to anybody. Go and show yourself to the priest and make the offering laid down by Moses for your cleansing. That will certify the cure. Naturally, the miraculously healed man couldn't help himself and told everyone he ran into. Word spread until Jesus couldn't stay in the town because of the uproar. teeming crowds wanted their own miracle, he fled to the countryside, where they continued to pursue him. Would we also be so overawed as to miss the larger point? I think so. In India today, there is a well-known woman saint who reputedly cured a leper by touching his sores. I remember reading too about a guru who used to let anyone into his house on feast days, holding the laws of hospitality to be sacred. He was not rich, and his followers were distressed that hundreds of guests would appear at his door to be fed. The guru only smiled and made a strange request. Keep feeding everyone from those buckets of rice and lentils, he said, but first cover them with a cloth. The buckets were covered so that no one could see into them, and as many times as the ladles were dipped in, there were always more food to go around. In this way, the guru performed the same miracle as Jesus. It is easy to be awed by such stories, but is it helpful when we seek to know facts? From our awe, a wealth of superstition, fable, and often false hope has developed. Yet in the blurring of the quantum and the miraculous, a single reality is beginning to emerge. Stephen Hawking indicated in his A Brief History of Time that if the laws of nature were deeply explored, we would one day know the mind of God. Here he echoed a famous remark by Einstein: I want to know how God thinks. Everything else is a detail. Because he was a rare visionary, I hope that Einstein would accept as a start the following map of how God thinks. Virtual domain, the field of spirit. Quantum domain, the field of mind. Material reality, the field of physical existence. If you feel secure with these terms, you can clear up mystery after mystery. Literally all the paradoxes of religion start to unravel, and God's ways make sense for the first time. Let me give an example from the field of healing. Some decades ago, an Italian army officer was taken on a stretcher to the Shrine of Lourdes. He was suffering from bone cancer in its most advanced metastasized stage. One hip joint was so ravaged that it had all but dissolved, and his leg was kept attached only by a splint. The officer had no desperate expectations of a cure, but he took the holy waters, along with thousands of other pilgrims who flocked to this site. Over the next few months, a careful X-ray record was kept as his cancer was miraculously healed. This did not just entail the malignancy disappearing. His entire hip joint regrew. Medical science has no explanation for such a thing, and the Italian military officer became one of the authenticated healings attributed to the Virgin Mary at Lourdes. I believe around 70 of these have been verified since such claims have been examined by a panel of doctors adhering to the strictest standards of proof. If we refer to our model, this healing involves a unique event. All three levels of reality were in communication. The soldier's body and his cancer were on the material level. His prayers were on the quantum level. God's intervention came from the virtual level. In one sense, this seems to make a miracle seem very cold-blooded and clinical, but in another sense, it makes everything a miracle. And why shouldn't that be so? The fact is that stars, mountains, monarch butterflies, and a single skin cell all depend on the same open lines of communication. The flow of reality is miraculous because invisible emptiness gets transformed into the brilliant orange of a butterfly's wing or the massive solidity of a mountain without any effort at all. This unseen power is sacred and mythic but present all the time. Science is guilty of trying to explain it away instead of explaining it. A real theory of everything would instruct us in the art of living on all three levels of reality with equal power and security. Saints strive to get to that point. It is the true meaning of enlightenment. This is all to say that God's mystery is the same as the mystery of the world. The promise made by Jesus to show what no human mind has ever conceived has been fulfilled during our lifetime. Indeed, Niels Bohr, the great Danish physicist, stated that quantum physics is not only stranger than we think, it is stranger than primary beliefs. Whatever can be thought of has already been created by God and is real somewhere, if not in this world, then in another. Religious trappings offend many rigorous scientists, but do we have to have any? I remember as a young doctor reading about a patient suffering from terminal cancer who was cured literally by an injection of saline, ordinary salt water. He had entered the hospital, his body completely disfigured by swollen malignant lymph nodes. This was in the 50s, when medicine was riding a crest of optimism about finding a cure for cancer very quickly. Patients were routinely killed or nearly killed with doses of mustard gas, the same poison used on soldiers in the trenches in World War I, but also the first crude chemotherapy. This man was desperate to be given the latest wonder treatment known as Cryobiozan. His doctor despaired of wasting the drug on someone who would probably be dead before the week was out. But out of pity, he arranged for a single dose of Cryobiozan and injected it on a Friday. He left over the weekend, fully expecting never to see his charge again, but on his return Monday morning, the patient was jubilant. Every trace of cancer had vanished, his lymph nodes had returned to normal, and he felt completely well. Stunned, his doctor released him as cured, knowing full well that a single dose of Cryobiozan could not possibly have made a difference over a few days. But the story becomes, if anything, much stranger. After some time had passed, the patient read in the newspaper that testing on Cryobiozan had proved ineffective. Within a matter of days, his cancer returned, and once again he entered the hospital in a terminal state. His doctor had nothing to give him, so he resorted to the most drastic of placebos. He told the man that he would be injected with new, improved Cryobiozan, while in reality giving him nothing but saline solution. Again, the man was healed in a matter of days. For the second time, he left without evidence of cancer in his body. The story doesn't have a happy ending, because when he later discovered that all hope for Cryobiozan was abandoned, he contracted lymph cancer for the third time, and this time he died rapidly. But the essence of the story is that spirit acts by flowing from the virtual to the quantum to the material level. This is what all miracles have in common, whether they occur with religious trappings or not. The crucial importance of religion is not to be discarded, however. Faith in God is a way of opening the lines of communication beyond the material, so is prayer or hope. The mind cannot do it simply by thinking. If there is ever going to be a science of miracles, it begins with intangibles that are rooted in spirit. We are only partway toward solving the mystery. Once again I gaze upon the great pyramid of Cheops. Only this time I don't see an awesome pile of sandstone, but an idea. Several ideas, actually. The first is sheer spiritual audacity. This pyramid was once entirely sheathed in a layer of white limestone because its builder wanted to outdazzle the sun. That was the whole point. In fact, without equality to the sun god, these audacious ancients would just have been glorified worker ants. This is a reminder that human beings aspire to be more than humans. The other idea behind the pyramid is wonder. Sacred sites tell us that we are wondrous creatures who should be doing wondrous works. And you can still see that here, for it would be more than 4,000 years before another structure encompassed such a volume of space, and that happened on a flat sandbar on the east coast of Florida. The vertical assembly building at the Kennedy Space Center is tall enough to hold a Saturn V moon rocket upright and has proportions boggling the mind. Standing as it does on a featureless landscape, you think you are close to it when you still have a mile to go. But isn't just the scale of the thing that awes us. This building is also an idea, the idea that we will find our origins and our cosmic family. The Greek gods were once our family, along with the Indian gods and the Jehovah of the Book of Genesis. All were cosmic beings, and we traced our origins back to the beginning of the cosmos. Now the giant rockets blast off. One will soon go to gather interstellar dust on the off chance that it will contain even one microorganism. If a single bacterium comes back from deep space, we will have found our own cosmic seed. It's not a whole family, but it's a beginning. As the old myths wear out, new ones spring up in our souls. Prometheus brought us fire, and now these rockets of the fire we send back to the gods. We are returning the gift and also reaching out. We crave to know that we are sacred once again. Are we? The answer isn't in the galactic dust, but in ourselves. The deepest levels of the quantum domain are the common ground where our hands reach out to touch God. When that happens, there is a double wonder. What we touch is divine, but it is also ourselves. Before we proceed any further, I want to offer 3 lists that summarize where we are. These don't need to be memorized or studied. Everything contained in them will be discussed in clear, simple language as we move ahead. But this seems like a good place to pause and reflect. Without using religious terminology, we have discovered a great many facts about God. There are strange facts, perhaps, not easily translated into ordinary life. There is no doubt, though, that from these seeds a complete vision of God will blossom. Virtual domain equals spirit. No energy, no time. Unbounded, every point in space is every other point. Wholeness exists at every point. Infinite silence. Infinite dynamism. Infinitely correlated. Infinite organizing power. Infinite creative potential. Eternal. Unmeasurable. Immortal beyond birth and death. Casual. Quantum domain equals mind. Creation manifests. Energy exists. Time begins. Space expands from its source. Events are uncertain. Waves and particles alternate with one another. Only probabilities can be measured. Cause and effect are fluid. Birth and death occur at the speed of light. Information is embedded in energy. Material reality equals visible universe. Events are definite. Objects have firm boundaries. Matter dominates over energy. 3-dimensional. Knowable by the 5 senses. Time flows in a straight line. Changeable. Subject to decay. Organisms are born and die. Predictable. Cause and effect are fixed.